By the way, I want to announce the fact that my cat now has her own account on my computer. Somehow she walked across
She
the
actually
keyboard when
logged
the
in.
desktop was up, and I noticed it's like a whole nother user. It's like a whole nother account on my computer.
Well, that's some pretty next level achievement on your keyboard by your cat.
Isn't it?
It kind of like confirms like one's suspicions about one's cat, doesn't it?
About cats, yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. If she gets an email account, then I better be really worried.
Well, I was going to say, what you need to worry about is next she's going to log in and delete your accounts.
Yeah,
so
or I'm going to start seeing her on social media. Oh my gosh.
Exactly, yeah. She's going to start taking over your pages and, yeah. It sounds like sounds like things are proceeding apace there.
Yes, it's Jay Lambert, huh?
Exactly.
At Waymeet. Goodness gracious.
The feline revolution has begun at Waymeet now.
No kidding. Jeez. She's going to get her own Instagram account at some point, but that might make her head swell. I don't know.
Right.
It's just, I finally decided she needs to have her own because there's so many people on Instagram, and I love animals so much that my whole like supposedly business Instagram account is like clogged with dogs and cats. So I'm like, okay, I need to move them all over into a whole other account.
Right. Which is not unusual, right? For them
no, it's not at all unusual.
Way, but yes.
No.
Exactly. Well, as long as she doesn't have her own VIP account in Lotro yet, then we should still probably be okay.
That's true. Oh my God, what's this on my bill?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the next stage. All right. Okay, I am ready to begin.
You ready to roll? Okay.
I am.
Good. All right. So I must say, I have this. I'm not going to do it, but I have this fantasy of doing the 3, 2, 1 pausing for the community editor and just leaving a really long pause. So the editor's like, "What happened?" But I won't. Okay. 3, 2, 1, pausing for the convenience of the editor in memory of Dave Cale. Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are listening to this. This is not Dave Cale introducing the Silmarillion Project. This is Trish Lambert because Dave unfortunately can't be with us today. But all I have to say about today is because we're going to be finishing up the evildoers at this portion of our show. So I'm looking forward to this. I was telling Corey that, I always am concerned. Y'all may have noticed if you ever listened to the series that I'm always like, what about the bad guys? What about the bad guys?
Right.
And I think the reason for that is that I think it could be really easy for us to forget about those guys because, we get into the good guy story and stuff. And I just worry that like somewhere down the line, we're going to end up with cardboard cutout evil guys. Yes. So we're not going to do that, right? We're committed to not doing that. So Corey Olson, the Tolkien professor, is going to lead us in a discussion of bad dudes.
That's right. Because, we did so much good work in Season 1 with Morgoth and Sauron, and then in Season 2 with Sauron.
We really crafted that whole story of how they became and stuff like that, and we need to kind of continue that level of commitment.
It was definitely my favorite element of Season 1, was really thinking through a good explanation, a good story about Morgoth's fall, which, happened. What we get in the Ainulindale is very interesting, but it's not exactly a narrative. It is a narrative, but it's not a Morgoth narrative, right? We sort of see him already falling. We see his fall dramatized in the music. But really kind of trying to understand him as a character. That was, as I say, my favorite part about Season 1. And I don't want to lose sight of him. It's hard because Morgoth himself is getting, he's diminishing, right? So having him become sort of more shallow is a little bit okay, but we need to be in control of that, right? We need to make sure that we're really conveying.
Well, Sam, I think that's part of the challenge too. I was just going to say, it's like Tolkien kind of makes him a cardboard cutout, right?
Well, yeah.
It's like from the moment he goes bad, he's like, okay, now he's bad. Boom. That's it.
Right.
And it just is like he stays static for basically the rest of and he's very predictable. And so I think it's even more challenging now because we don't have any real depth from the source material.
Exactly.
But, I think we need to not have him be, I think the showing of the shallowness. How do we do? That's kind of a good question. How do we show that?
Yeah, how do we show that? And I think one clear answer to this is through Sauron, right? Through the clandestine protagonist of our entire show, right? The one character who will bind Season 1 through Season 25 or wherever we end is Sauron, right? So having him be the one, and I think. Because at this point, Sauron is still far enough upstream from Morgoth on that path down into the void, right? That we can we can still use contrast between Sauron and Morgoth, both to show how far gone Morgoth is by comparison, but also to like prefigure where Sauron is headed. Even have him at some point become aware of this and worry about it, like to have him looking at Morgoth and saying like, man, I don't want to go this way. Right, I don't want this. I don't want to let this happen to me.
I don't want to do this. Yeah,
so that when so that we have a new layer of tragedy with Sauron. Right, we had his first tragedy when he turned. Right, and to have a further level of tragedy when he becomes, the sort of maniacal monster that Morgoth is slowly turning into, which he had resolved never to be. We so that the final ending of Sauron, as when his ring is destroyed and he's off in the wilderness.
And the sadness is he even ends up being kind of Morgoth light, even at that point.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I have a question, and because I've kind of been in and out, as you know, so I've missed some of the conversations. Have we ever talked about? Do we think that Sauron honestly, truly, really stays absolutely loyal to Morgoth, even past the void? Okay.
No,
do you think he's using him for his own purposes, basically? Like, yes. I'm thinking the Numenor thing is not that he really believed Morgoth was, but because he didn't want them to worship him, he was using Morgoth as the...
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's okay.
Yeah. So I mean, the way looking for, and of course, this is looking a good ways forward, but I think it is relevant in the shorter term as well.
I do too.
It means where we need to begin.
I was going to say we need to start to plant the seeds, and
So here's my thought about that. He will know that Morgoth is never going to become a non-entity, right? He's always going to be there, and he's always going to be powerful. He's going to be less powerful than he was, but that's a long ways to fall, right? He is still always going to be more and more powerful. My thought with Sauron is that Sauron is, loyal isn't the right word. He's not loyal, because loyal suggests that the loyalty itself, is like a virtue, a principle. Right. He follows Morgoth because he is. He has been converted to Morgoth's like doctrine of being strong and controlling and ordering things yourself, and he believes in Morgoth's vision for that and in supporting Morgoth's vision for that. But as Morgoth declines over the seasons, he is going to, I think, more and more begin scheming for himself. Sauron is. And I think especially after Morgoth's banishment, after the War of Wrath, he's going to perceive Morgoth's influence still present in the world, right? And I think that his goal at that point would be not to be serving Morgoth, not trying to help Morgoth, but trying to harness it, right? To use Morgoth as like a power source in some sense. Like if he can manipulate the power of Morgoth in the world, then he can thereby increase his own power. Like he's in charge. Like he would see himself as in charge. So he would see himself as Morgoth's heir, essentially, still also making use of Morgoth's power. So in a sense, he's trying to carry on the work of Morgoth, but again, not for Morgoth's sake.
But here's a little thing that I'm thinking we need to put a pin in, of course. But Marie, maybe if we're getting a good response from Corey on this, War of Wrath, could it be? Could we actually have Sauron somehow, either directly or indirectly, bringing about Morgoth's capture?
Yeah, do we see him turn his coat? Well,
because he starts to think about the fact that Morgoth's doing this wrong. I could do it better. I think of what would happen if he wasn't here. I'd have, access to all of his bloody-bloodies and then he sticks his foot out so Morgoth trips over it as Morgoth walking by.
Or even, of course, the most noteworthy thing about Sauron in the second half of the Silmarillion is his complete absence, right? After the Beren and Luthien story, he's gone and there's no reference to him ever again until the Numenor story, until after the War of Wrath. So at the very least, a sort of strategic withdrawal, I think, would be the way to play that.
Yeah, and I could see him actually at the end, like at the end of War of Wrath, maybe a little soliloquy of, "This is time to consolidate. I'm going to, get my power together. Maybe even travel some. You know."
Right. Now,
so that kind of explains why we don't see him, maybe, or something.
Maybe travel some. I like that. There's so many
Maybe
places in Middle Earth I haven't seen.
Go to the Bahamas.
Exactly, right. But yeah, I mean, I would want to. I'd want to think carefully about that passage that says that Sauron repented, and perhaps at first it was genuine. I'd be interested to see how we could play that. But I do think, at least before that, his plan A when the war begins. I think that he will be looking at Morgoth and saying, like, on the one hand, Morgoth has almost conquered all of Middle-earth, so that's kind of good. But on the other hand, the guy's like a shell of himself, right? Like this is not.
It's like he's going senile.
Exactly.
A bad guy.
This is something like he now needs to be managed rather than assisted, right? His vision, he's no longer able really to be able to achieve his vision, not with any nuance, right? He's just smashing stuff at this point. And,
right.
And Sauron, I have a more delicate hand, and things would really be better off in my hands. So, anyway, I
do think that's worth having a little chat about.
Yeah,
I do too. In a very, but not in an overt way.
No,
in a very covert way. Yes. But I do think that's good to know where we're headed, because those seeds have to be planted. That development needs to be seen.
Yes.
There needs to be some conversations or some facial expressions, at least.
The very beginning, yes, the very beginning of it. I think the first sign of that schism that we're discussing here should be at the moment that we had last season, in season 3, when Morgoth took over the Orc project with a steel fist, right? When he took the subtly twisted like dark elves that Sauron had been trying to build and just twisted them into sort of physically and spiritually monstrous bruisers, which are the orcs. Sauron would find that repugnant, right? Like, he just wrecked it, right? I was trying to do this subtle, interesting thing, which would have given us way more capability. So this sense of Sauron seeing himself as sort of tactically, if not strategically, superior to Morgoth's hatred and anger and pain already beginning. I mean, so the gap wouldn't be wide, but I think that would be the first glimpse of it that we could give.
And that's so Sauron, because it's exactly the same thing he did in Valinor. Mm-hmm. Better. This could be, but we could do it. I mean, it's the same mechanism.
Right.
Now it's like where he is now, so it's perfect.
Yeah. I think that would work really well, and we'll have opportunities. We'll get back to this in a little bit. But because the fall of men, which is what we want to focus on first, it's the next thing we want to talk about here today, is going to be there's at least going to be discussion between Morgoth and Sauron, and so we'll have an opportunity to have the two of them interacting, and so we can possibly be thinking about that there as well. So we'll get some opportunities to we don't want to move it forward too fast, because we've got many years before this is going to happen. Sauron is going to remain. Morgoth is not declining that fast, right? So, we still need to show that he is in charge of his faculties. But that might be a really good way. We were talking last time. One of the questions we were, sort of leaving with was, how do we show Morgoth's decline? Maybe we don't yet really show it. It's not obvious yet, but we just have Sauron notice. Sauron wonder.
Notice.
Right?
Yeah.
It could just be a few lines in dialogue between him and Thuringwethil where he's uncertain about what is happening to Morgoth and what trajectory Morgoth is on here, right? So that Sauron
a lot
is
of
the first one to raise the question.
Behind Morgoth's back.
Exactly.
Once he said that to Thuringwethil, then it's like all facial expressions.
Right, exactly. And so it's through their suspicions and uncertainties about Morgoth that and we can have, I think we could even have moments where Sauron kind of oversteps himself and Morgoth squashes him, showing that like he's not in fact all that declined yet, and we can
True,
show that
true.
he's still at least as cunning as Sauron is and everything. But
well,
yeah,
I do think that when we get to the end of after the Luthien confrontation, I think we'll need to do kind of a Wither Sauron chat.
Absolutely, yeah.
And when I said travel, actually, I wasn't being facetious. What I was thinking in my head was he would want to travel to Herod and to play, to like start to recruit and get those people on his side, kind of thing, because that didn't happen overnight,
right?
Right. So you figure those are the years that he's spending, because. Don't those? I mean, those people would become also, I would assume, elements, in his next rising. I mean, before the last alliance battle,
Yeah.
The next
you're right. I mean, there's a reason why the Easterlings are all prepared to his hand, right, when he sets up in Mordor, and why he positions himself where he does apart from the handy volcano. There's I mean, that I know, like, that's why that particular area was chosen, but more it is the western frontier of the lands where his dominion is most solid, which means, again, I think this brings us back to Hildorian and the corruption of men. Which is a great place. I think we're going to want to, trace that.
Because I think if we do this right, then we don't even have to really do it again. But we'll have that in our memories when we know he's going off and doing it. It's a repeat. He's just doing it multiple times.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Agreed.
Well, I'll bring us back to the present now.
So coming back to the present, actually coming back absolutely to the present, and slightly into the future. Announcements, quick, before I forget. As I'm prone to do once I get drawn into things. So just quick reminder about the upcoming... No, that's all good. Quick reminder about the upcoming events that are happening. We've got Sunshine Moot in Orlando on March 23rd, so that's coming up soon now. We're almost a month away from Orlando Moot, so getting some registrations in for that, which is awesome. So if you are in the Florida area and want to join us for Sunshine Moot, please do. We've got Nader Moot in the Netherlands, in Leiden, in the Netherlands on April 13th. So this is our European Moot for this year. We did London Moot last year. We're doing Nader Moot this year. So we were in England last year. We'll be on the continent this year. Which I'm super excited about. I've never been to the Netherlands before, so I can't wait to join folks. And just a note there, their call for papers goes through March 3rd. So that's actually coming up fairly soon. So if you'd like to come to Nadermit, which I hope you will, if you have any suggestions for a discussion topic or a presentation you might want to give, please look at the webpage there to suggest something there. And then finally, Mythmoot 6, which is happening at the end of June. The early bird pricing ends on March 4th, so we want to draw that to your attention. The prices will jump up a little bit after March 4th, so now is the time to get on that. You got about a week and a half for that. And just to also draw your attention to something cool there. This is the Mythmoot page, signumuniversity.org/Mythmoot, and we have a couple new special guests that we are announcing. We have Diana Glyer, who's the author of Bandersnatch and the Company They Keep. She's a wonderful Inkling scholar and has spent a lot of time talking and writing about the Inklings in community, the Inklings as a kind of writers group and how they played off each other. She's done wonderful work on the Inklings. Katie McDaniel is also joining us. She's a Harry Potter scholar and the host of the Reading, Writing, Rolling podcast. She is awesome. So if you are interested in talking about Harry Potter stuff, she's going to be coming in giving a Potter talk, and she'll be there with us this week. Jacob Rogers is also coming to join us, and he is the writer of the One Ring role-playing game, the tabletop role-playing system, which does the best job of adapting the mechanics of the One Ring role-playing system. Most intriguingly, they reflect Tolkien's world more intriguingly than any other role-playing system I've ever seen. I love Lotro. Lotro does a fantastic job with Tolkien's world and Tolkien's narrative. Lotro people have probably heard me before say that, the biggest reservation I have with Lotro as an adaptation is that it still kind of uses a fairly default kind of combat gaming system, right? And sort of structure. Within that framework, it does a wonderful, wonderful job of adapting Tolkien's world and of being true to Tolkien's world. The One Ring role-playing game does go one step further back, and all of the mechanics of the world are really thinking about Tolkien's world in ways which I find really, really fascinating. So anyway, so Jacob Rogers is going to be there, and he's going to be talking about his role-playing system and adapting Tolkien, and it's going to be super cool. So anyhow, those are our new special guests. Wanted to draw your attention here to the call for papers, as well as the registration link. Everything is available here so that you can see what's going on at Mythmoot. So, really cool stuff. Just wanted to draw your attention to all of that upcoming fun stuff. Okay, so let's get back to the bad guys. Here's the outline of what we're going to talk about, or what we're going to hope to talk about here today. The fall of men in Hildorian and the creation of dragons. So there were three major things that the bad guys are up to in this season that we wanted to talk about. One is the capture and release elf program, which we discussed last time, and I felt we made a lot of good progress with that. Oh, and by the way, there was on that subject, one last small note. There was a suggestion on the discussion boards about who. Remember, we were suggesting Rog of Gondolin, or Rog eventually of Gondolin, for the dude who escapes under his own power. We were suggesting Anail, the Sindar of Hithlum, who will end up being Tuor's foster father, as the inadvertent traitor, right? Who then puts himself into sort of voluntary exile. And we were suggesting, blanking on her name, Angrod's wife, totally blanking on her name, sorry, for the one who is whose will is crushed, Eldelote, thank you, the one whose will is crushed and who becomes, or almost becomes, a sort of unwilling traitor to the cause. What we did not have was a nominee for a person who gets captured and doesn't ever escape. We were thinking about the possibility of using oh wait, who were we thinking of? We're thinking about she was the one who's put under the spell of bottomless dread. That's right. Anyway, so we had some suggestions for who gets imprisoned. The suggestion on the discussion board, and Marie, you'll correct me if I'm wrong about this, was Curufin's wife, which I think is a fascinating idea. I love the idea of having Curufin undergoing grief that can kind of humanize him for the audience, so that he's not just the scheming evil guy. I mean, he's still the scheming evil guy, but he's also scheming evil guy who has suffered a legitimate grief, and whose grief we can have compassion with, even while we still see that he's a scheming evil guy. It also gives Celebrimbor a tragedy. I mean, the Witch Noldor doesn't have a tragedy in his experience, but it has a more sort of personal tragedy there. So of course it also gives us a way to have a Feanorian craftsman in the service, unwilling slave service, of Morgoth, which of course is good, because you'll remember when Gwyndor shows up, when Turin meets Gwyndor, after Gwyndor has escaped from the mines where the Noldor are being forced, the captured Noldor are being forced to work. In the original version, that is in the alliterative Children of Húrin, Gwyndor is carrying one of the blue Feanorian lamps. He's escaped with one of the blue Feanorian lamps, which I think would be fine to do. I don't believe, it's one problem about reading all the other earlier versions. I can't remember anymore if that gets mentioned in the published Silmarillion, but I don't think it does. But I see no reason not to keep that detail. But that would give us an uninteresting connection, right? If we have Celebrimbor's wife getting captured, we can have a scene where she is being made to make Feanorian lamps, to sort of give the secret of the Feanorian lamps to Morgoth. she would make an excellent source for that, right? That makes all kinds of sense. So I really like that. So yeah, I'm totally down with Celebrimbor's mom being the one, one who is captured and who doesn't escape from Angband. Because as I said, we can actually have a function of her captivity. She would be one. Curfin isn't gonna marry some schmo, right? She's gonna also be an excellent craftsman and so craftsperson. So she would be put to horrible uses by Morgoth, which is great. So yeah, thanks. This was a suggestion on the discussion boards by somebody with lots of numbers in their name, which makes it really hard to say. I think I don't even know how to say that. Angie, maybe something or other with 4s and 5s. Anyway, thank you, Angie with 4s and 5s, for that suggestion. I think that's a brilliant suggestion. Maybe that's what that is. Angel eyes, possibly. Is that how is a 4 supposed to be a Y? Okay. All right. I guess I can. Got it. All right. Angel eyes then, if that's what that translates to in number speak. Yeah. Well, anyway, but thank you for that. That was very cool. Good suggestion. So, okay. So we're down with that. We still need to think about how this interacts with the other plots, but we'll come back to that after we do the other plots. So let's talk about the fall of men in Hildorian. Now, here's the main thing here is that this is going to happen largely off screen, right? We need to figure this out, but we're not planning to do a sequence of the fall of Hildorian. But we want to know what happened. We need to know what has happened for a couple different reasons. One, we need to know so that we can know the movements of the bad guys, right? Morgoth and possibly Sauron are both involved. At least Morgoth, we know, is involved in the fall of men, which means there's got to be a chunk of time when he's not there, when he's not present up there in the north. So obviously we need to incorporate that into the story. Is Sauron going to be there too? In which case we need to get his absence incorporated into the story as well. We need to talk about it enough. At the very least, we need to have a little bit of exposition, right? So that people are prepared for, like our viewers are prepared for this, right? To know, because we teased the awakening of men at the end of season 3. We will want to kind of check in on that in some way. The arrival of men in season 5 should be a bit of a surprise. It will certainly be a surprise to the elves, but we can't let people forget about it entirely either. So that's another reason that we need to think that through. Oh wow, Marie, Anile was an unpopular suggestion? Are you kidding? He seems like the perfect candidate for me. What's wrong with that suggestion? And he's got nothing else to do until he's Tuor's stepfather, and that's like ages in the future. Okay, not ages, but, centuries in the future. Oh, man. Okay. Anyway. Yeah, no, Marielle, that's a good thought. Marielle is saying it could explain the lull in action in the siege. She's suggesting something along the lines of, okay, orcs aren't working. Let's try out men. Hold the fort until we get back. So that we would have the fall of men in Hildorian happening in the latter part of the season. If, as we were thinking it through last time, I'm thinking that the culmination of the catch and release program among the elves would probably be around the Dagor Aglareb. If we have that whole like betrayal and the letting the orcs in the back door thing going on with Eldolate, that seems to me like a fairly climactic moment, right, in that whole plot line of the elves being subverted, so that after that we don't necessarily have to have any particular thing sort of or show any particular thing being accomplished. After that, we just have like rank paranoia breaking out all over the place, and it's people dealing with the suspicions and trying to how do we move on and actually work together and trust anybody in a world where we know that this is going on, right? That should be the thing that's happening. So we don't need any new events exactly in the catch and release program, other than we could have an occasional disappearance, perhaps. But then in the second half of the season, where the elves are kind of trying to deal with the aftermath of all that. So Marie, people are worried about the Anael's thing that damages Tuor's upbringing. No. So here's my counter argument against those who are concerned. Don't be concerned. Anael's going to be a great character later on. He's going to be remorseful because he didn't do anything wrong. Like, his will wasn't subverted. He was deceived. He was manipulated. He was like hypnotized. But he's gonna get better. He is gonna be haunted by that. I think it's going to be one of the things that's going to lead him to have compassion when he sees, Tuor in the wilderness. I think it just makes him a deeper character. He's not corrupted. He's wounded. He's going to be psychologically scarred by that experience. But I think it's going to make him, we can easily help that make him into the kind of character, the kind of sort of, rogue, kind of guerrilla leader in the wilderness, on the frontier, sort of hermit, half guerrilla leader, right? Resisting Morgoth, but in secret, and then taking in Tuor and teaching him. He could be like Tuor. I mean, it wouldn't be hard for us to show his raising of Tuor and protection of Tuor as him seeing that as some kind of atonement, right? I think that we could make that into a really beautiful moment there, actually. So no, I see that as an advantage. No, that's one of the reasons why I find him so perfect. Anyhow, okay. So I don't know if that will satisfy the folks who are unhappy with that, but I don't think it's going to mess it up at all. I think it's going to just make it richer and more cool, because we got to give him some kind of background, right? We can't just have Tuor's. It would be far worse, I think, to have Tuor's foster father be like some random schmo we've never met before, right? Who's just like, hi, I'm a random gray elf that you've never heard of that happens to be here for some reason. I mean, yeah, we can make up a backstory, but that's what we're doing. This is it, right? Why not? And I think it could work together with it super well. Anyway, back to the Fall of Men. So if the catch and release program, the bad guys' plot of that basically is exposed in the Dagor Aglareb, that would give us and especially if we were talking about Sauron and Thuringwethil being focused on that element of it in the front half of the season, that would shift the Fall of Men to the second half of the season, which is cool, actually, because especially since we suggested that the men are awakening as the sun rises at the end of season 3. This will give the men some time to have a paradisical existence. I mean, they should be able to like hang out in the Garden of Eden for a little while, right? So we have half a season for the men to be unfallen, and which enables us, when we do have Sauron or Morgoth, whichever gets there first, get there, then when they get there, they find not like a few naked people just waking up and staggering around, right? They find like a paradisical society, which still might be technologically crude, but which will be a fully developed society at that point. So some time has passed. So that's all good. That'll be good timing, I think. So I said there were a couple reasons why we needed to figure this out, in addition to the movements of the bad guys, right? Who's present and who's not and when in the season. The other thing is to set up the wanderings of men before. So there's going to be dim memories that something bad happened in the past. Like, we're going to know that there was a fall. And we need to have some explanation. And this, Trish, then brings me back to our discussion of the Easterlings and stuff, right? Because ultimately, we have to have a division into at least 2 major camps of the humans, right? After the fall. Like the result, at the end of the day, after the whole sequence of the Fall of Men is done, the result needs to be some of the men are going to leave and seek the West, right? Those are the ones who are eventually going to be crossing the mountains and entering season 5. So they need to leave for some reason, right? They need to split from the others for some reason, which suggests if all of them as a group fell, then there needs to be dissent, right? That the ones who end up wandering into Beleriand can be those who are seeking the light, right? They've heard rumors that there is light in the West. So for some reason they need to be defecting from those who have been corrupted and are serving Morgoth, right? They don't have to yet be like totally, they're not like absolutely good guys. They're still confused, right? They still don't know what's going on exactly. Their information is very, very, very little. But they're trying to put that beside them, which is why they're kind of oriented and ready to, many of them anyway, ready to accept allegiance with, alliance with the elves. But of course, that also leaves some who stay behind, obviously. And that, Trish, is where I really like your suggestion that ultimately those who stay behind are those who are the ancestors of the Easterlings, essentially. Mm-hmm. And not just the Easterlings that we see in The Lord of the Rings, but there is presumably a lot of continent off in that direction, right? There are whole nations and empires over there.
That's really interesting because culturally, they're going to want to justify and rationalize their staying, okay?
Right.
So they're going to end up with a culture, tradition, oral storytelling, whatever, that's going to be kind of like biased toward Sauron, biased toward Morgoth, biased that direction. So there'll be fertile ground, for Sauron. Which I just think that's really interesting that, we could pull that through. It's not like, it's not like just in the Third Age that Sauron went and recruited them.
Right.
There's Absolutely. Been good feeling about him based on their own need to feel good about themselves.
Right. Absolutely. And the other thing that we have to remember, and this is something that we can find some way to comment on at some point down the road. But the thing about nations of humans is that once they're you can't just convert them and set them in line and then they stay, right? Because 3 generations down the road, they're going to have forgotten, right? So this is one thing that Sauron can kind of find sort of annoying, is that they win,
I like that idea.
They win the loyalty of the people of Hildorian first, right? And those who stay kind of keep their loyalty, their affiliation with the bad guys, fine. But then, Sauron goes back. Say he goes back and visits them, Trish, as you were suggesting, after he gets ousted by Luthien and Huan, right? Maybe he goes out and he finds them and he's like, okay, I'm going to go back because fortunately I still have a stronghold of power back there, right? So he goes back there and what's happened, right? They've wandered off and they've barely forgot. Yeah. They haven't had any contact with their dark gods in generations. And so he's got to reconvert them again because they've practiced. They're still legends, so they're still a fertile field, as you say. He can play on their memories and myths and traditions.
Which is actually a great prototype for what he's going to do with the Numenorians later on down the line.
Exactly. And of course, he's going to have to do the same. So after the War of Wrath, right, he goes, and it's the Second Age now. And so he's going to go set himself up and build Mordor and make magic rings and stuff like that. So he goes back into the East, and sure enough, he's got to reconquer and reconvert the whole darn population again because it's been generations and generations. So, I mean, this is humans don't stay put, right? And because they keep dying and new generations arising, which know not the evil lords who used to rule them before. So it's always a fertile field, but it's not static, right? So the East has to be reconverted by Sauron again and again.
Well, that might also explain what he does with the Nazgul, too. It's look, I've been through this myself 16 times. You guys go do it now. I'm delegating the proselytizing to you.
And the Blue Wizards.
Oh.
In the Third Age, right? Yeah. So Sauron will over time develop systems for because you're right, that can be part of his goal, right? I need a stable leadership structure, stable in time, right?
Right.
Because as soon as I set up an empire, I turn my back, and it's only been a measly 100 years, and the next thing you know, like the grandkids of the people who...
They've slipped again.
Exactly. It's all chaos.
Yeah, you're right.
again.
And the Nine Rings, I mean, that's like one of the things. That's one of the purposes of the Kings of Men with the Nine Rings, right? Extend their lifespans.
Yeah.
And they now have a mission. He turns the mission of keeping that alive in the cultures over to those guys.
Yeah, exactly. So Mario, I'm not going to commit myself to the Fallen Blue Wizards idea, but I kind of like it. I'm not going to lie.
Well, I think it's an interesting one to consider for sure.
Yeah. I mean, we can think about it. Maybe
we could have them be doing it unwittingly, right? I mean, we could have them be unwitting in the sense of they end up being tools of Sauron unwittingly.
Of course,
but that's kind of a...
Yeah, that would be fun. And obviously to make them fall in a way which is not identical to Saruman, right? To sort of explore a different way for wizards to fall. And, of course, here's another fun thing. How about decoupling the two blue wizards? Maybe one falls and the other one does not, right? I mean, we tend to think of the two blue wizards as a matched set.
Right, as a set. Salt and pepper shakers.
Exactly.
You know, one of the things about that is there's, Tolkien himself actually wrote about this. What if Gandalf had gotten the ring? And what would that be like?
Right.
Right? And it would be, he said it would be like the thing of, I'm going to do good. It's like I have the power to do good. And out of that, actually, evil would come. These two guys could actually be the demonstration of how that would happen.
Yes.
That they think they're doing it for the good. And it turns bad.
Well, especially thinking about another way to be like the opposite of Gandalf, right? Saruman is one version of an opposite of Gandalf.
Right.
But a different version of the opposite of Gandalf what if they decided to, at least one of them, again, says, like, I'm going to work from within the system, right? I'm going to try to bring them around. So I'm going to, like, bring myself into dominance among all these people, and I'm going to be accepted as, like, the Wizard King. But that process corrupts him once he achieves that kind of power. So Saruman tries to set himself up as an independent power. Like, he tries to set himself up as the sort of theoretically anti-Sauron who then just becomes the mini Sauron instead, right? Gandalf.
Well, and actually the way we've made Myron is Saruman is actually kind of Sauron light because he does the same thing. Oh, I could do it better. They're doing it wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So in Saruman we get the kind of that sort of typological echo thing going on, right? Where he once again echoes, just as Sauron himself is an echo of Morgoth. So Saruman is kind of an echo of Sauron, and I like how all that works. But yeah, to have, just as Gandalf detaches himself, he has no home, he has no affiliation, no political affiliation. He helps lots of people, but doesn't accept any positions of power or authority in any land. To have at least one of the Blue Wizards try to do it the other way, try to do it the way that Gandalf doesn't do it, right? And say, no, I am going to set myself up as, like, the king's trusted counselor and, try to govern things from behind the scenes.
The other one could be more of a Radagast-y kind of guy, which meaning I don't want to do, that didn't work, so I'm going to go off and do this, but becomes so focused and obsessed with doing good, he turns into a means justifies the ends kind of thing.
Yeah.
That he corrupts himself by...
Yeah, that would be interesting. I would like, by the way, to the one part of the... I would actually like to side with the Lotro developers and against the essay on the Istari in not having Radagast fail. Just have Radagast succeed in a less spectacular way than Gandalf.
I think that's absolutely...
He's a supporting actor rather than and what he does happens off stage, so we never know about it in the Lord of the Rings. Yeah. But so having one of the Blue Wizards be like the anti-Gandalf in the way that I was describing, and the other, as you were suggesting, being like the anti-Radagast, would be kind of fun, right?
Interesting. Now another angle on this is, of course, both Blue Wizards don't have to go bad necessarily.
Right,
but,
exactly. Or one of them could start going bad and then repent. That'd be fun.
Yeah,
right?
That'd be another
maybe
angle.
The anti-Radagast one. I don't know, but whatever. Anyway, we probably shouldn't go too far down this particular rabbit hole.
Well, And I think for something for us all to think about is it is an interesting thing because it's all the different ways Sauron could have gone. Or all, basically, it's like we're kind of showing all the different ways Sauron could have gone, or Saruman could have gone, or you know what I mean? It's the Maya having different, experience would be really interesting.
Clearly, no. Anyway. It's a super fun area of speculation. But anyhow, so the point is, we're in figuring out what happened in Hildorian. We're setting all this up, right? This is the civilization which is ultimately going, sort of the cradle of the civilization that's going to grow into all of that. So Hildorian is located out there. It's going to be, so we should have I think it would be pretty cool if like the actual place. So they're going to build a temple, right? The temple itself is going to get destroyed probably, but it would be really neat to have like at the center, like to have this like holy place in the middle of the Easterlings empire over there, which has been under the dominion of Sauron and his minions for, millennia. But to have there be this like sort of, shrine of Hildorian, a memory of the place where the humans awoke, which would be really fun. And Marielle, I agree. It gives us an opportunity to humanize the Easterlings and avoid that general trend in fantasy for strange foreigners to be naturally wicked. Yes, exactly.
Unilaterally bad. Yeah, yes. Absolutely.
Yes,
absolutely.
Exactly. Right. Yes, you can tell those people are evil because they look all Asian or whatever. Yes, exactly.
And they have frowns on their faces all the time.
Right, and funny costumes. Yes,
and funny costumes. Yeah.
And Marielle, you're right. We can wreck it if we want to. I mean, the War of Wrath gives us plenty of opportunity. I mean, we could have Hildorian just simply be lost. I kind of like keeping it. We can't have it actually preserved. Like, I'm a little bit tempted to have them build a temple to Morgoth, which is like still there in the Third Age. Like that would be a little bit cool. But I think that we should have the works of men more ephemeral than that, so that nothing built by men that early on is going to survive that long.
Right. Right.
But to have them not completely forget, to be able to have some kind of recollection. And Mariel, I don't think it should be Mordor. I mean, that'd be really interesting. But if that were down like in southern Mordor, for instance, that'd be kind of awesome. But I think Mordor needs to be a frontier land, right? Sauron establishes Mordor. My goodness, yeah. This is continually the problem with doing film on Fridays is I'm always so sleep deprived. By the time we get to film, I can barely speak straight. But that's okay. We can overcome. The point is, Sauron establishes Mordor on the frontier. Like after he will have gone after his return from Numenor, after his, so he will have been spending time rebuilding once again his dominions in the east, because again they keep forgetting as soon as he turns his back and leaves them for 500 years. He's going to have to go back and reconvert the Easterlings again, and he's going to establish Mordor as the frontier, like this is the western frontier of his whole realms. So yeah, that's it.
That should be another thing. Of course, the kings of men would understand this, but I mean, one of the other things is he's going to need to tell his minions is like, look, if we need to get something, if we need to like have a project with men, it needs to be done in a generation.
Yeah.
Or it needs to be done like in a lifetime, right? We don't have a long time with these people.
It's going to be something it's an interesting phenomenon, right? I mean, this is going to become relevant. This is going to become really relevant in the Second Age with the invasion of Eriador.
Yes.
Which happened over a long period of time, right? So he's going to have to raise generations of soldiers to bring to the front. Like, Sauron's forces are going to be dying of old age during the siege, so it's which is an interesting kind of shift from the First Age battles, right? But definitely something that he's got to think about.
It's interesting. Tolkien, obviously, he had such an epic mind. He would do these sweeping things of, would take, in 100 years, and he doesn't really think through the details. But the other side of this, though, this thing is this is actually that whole back to Tolkien's thing of this is mortality and immortality.
Yes.
That the story is about mortality and immortality. This is still, an expression of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Sauron himself having to kind of come to grips with this. And he's the one who is sort of using people in this way. See, the good guys have a different sort of way of looking at it, right? In that, like, they're like the Kingdom of Gondor, for instance. So yes, like the individual men may grow old and die, but the Kingdom of Gondor endures, right? And the Kingdom of Arnor endures, at least, until it doesn't. But anyway, so that, the idea of generations arising and continuing the fight, is a little bit more, whereas like when what you're running is a slave nation, the logistics of that are just different, right? And the politics of that are very different. And so Sauron having to think in kind of different ways is sort of interesting. Marielle says, do I think the bad guys grasp the full import of the lack of mortal time before the elves do? She says, I wonder if that's part of the tragedy of Agnor and Andreth, that he doesn't truly comprehend the lack of time. I love that, Marielle.
Yes,
we absolutely have to have a scene where Agnor returns to Andreth, having said, like, I shall return soon, and he returns in like 10 years, right?
Right.
Which to him is soon. He calls 10 years soon, and Andreth is visibly older than she was when he left, and he's like, holy cow. Right? Because, they're not going to... Certainly, the enemy will have become acquainted with men first, and thus acquainted with mortality in all this. So, okay. Hakon. Yeah, the origin of hobbits and all this. Nope, not going to talk about that now. But hang on, let me at least address this to one extent. This is so not relevant to season 3 or season 4, but the question is, when do we want to introduce hobbits? And how? Like, where do hobbits come from? Tolkien never answered that question. We've got to answer it. I have no idea where they come from. When do they come in? I think we have to make hobbits a second age phenomenon. I don't think we can make hobbits a first age. I don't think we have time to make them a first age phenomenon. I don't think we have any justification for bringing them into Beleriand, right?
We also have the Pookelmen too, don't we?
The Pookelmen are a first age phenomenon, and we've got to figure them out. But we've got a little bit of time there. I think we can bring the Pookelmen in, the Druidine we can bring in later on, like post Beren and Luthien. They should be around by the time of Turin Turambar, but...
would it be too corrupting to make the Pookelmen ancestors of hobbits?
Well, see, there's an interesting connection in that they're like both... The Pookelmen and the hobbits are the two examples that Tolkien gives of, like, to use vastly non-Tolkienian language, like genetically mutated humans. Right,
exactly. Right. Like... evolved, we're talking evolution here. That's
strains of men that have gone in a different direction and seem to be just different from other men, though ultimately originally connected to men and still broadly part of men. So there was a suggestion, Marie and Marielle are both reminding us on the discussion board that that hobbits should be connected to Entwives in some way. That's a fun idea. I really like that. At the very least, the early hobbits should be befriended by the Entwives, even if the Entwives aren't involved. Hard to see how the Entwives could be involved directly, but I don't understand it all. Anyway, well, never mind. I'm not going to get myself too distracted and think about the origin of hobbits today.
Well, one thing we could do, don't laugh at me. Okay. This is actually kind of funny. Is, when we're showing like the men, the villages or whatever. I mean, there could be like little people. I mean, there could be some, just in the background. We don't point to them or something, but there's like shorter statured men.
If you just want to have them waking up in Hildorian?
No, I mean, they would be part of the men population, right?
Exactly.
So you go in. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. So hobbits would be there from the beginning.
To the village, and there'd be like, they'd be early versions. They wouldn't be hobbits yet, but they would be shorter statured men. Shoot, I don't know.
Right. This is a season 4 question because we have to decide first and foremost, are hobbits part of the original plan of Eru in the making of the second Children of Iluvatar, or are they a later refinement in some
God, I
way
would
or
think
other?
they would have to have been part of the music, given the role they play.
Well, because
in the Third
really, I mean,
Age.
there's not so many options, right? I mean, in order for something like that to happen, because I mean, the hobbits are pretty different from humans, and we have no evidence that the rest of humans like mutate in that way, right? We just don't have enough examples. We have two: the Druidine, the Pukelmen, and the hobbits. So we have two examples, but that's not enough to suggest that it's just a thing that's happening all over the place to human beings. So are we thinking?
You're thinking in the sense of that sort of these shorter statured men are part of the original awakening.
Well, that's it. But that's my question. So basically, there are two options, right? Option number one is that the plan, Iluvatar's plan from the beginning, involves like regular humans and hobbits or proto-hobbits and like Druidine have some other role, right? And maybe others. There could be others elsewhere. There's a big continent, right? So there could be others like the Druidine that never interact with the folks of Beleriand or even of Eriador or Ravanian. So anyway, okay, so that's one possibility. One possibility is that this kind of racial diversity among humans, and I'm speaking, of course, of racial diversity much more than the kind of ethnic diversity that we often talk about among humans now, like fundamental racial diversity among humans, could be part of Iluvatar's original plan, or it could be the result of influence by the Valar later on. I don't see any other way in which it could happen, frankly. I don't think it could happen. I don't think even elves could do it. Think about that. We have a I'm about to say prerequisite, but that is so the wrong word. Precedent, that's the word I want. We have a precedent for this in Numenor, right? The Numenorians are specially blessed by the Valar. As a result, they change. They get taller, right? They're taller, they're stronger, they live longer. The duration of the lives, the physical stature, the wisdom and intelligence, all of these things happen as a result of the blessing of the Valar upon the Numenorians, right? So that Valar can intervene and not create a new species. We're not pulling a full Aule here, right, in the making of the dwarves, but some kind of influence. That would give us the justification to have both the Druidine and the hobbits be the result of some particular intervention by one or more of the Valar in the human race later on down the road, right? And Marielle says, do we want to even open the can of worms that is Bjorn? What an excellent question,
Oh
Marielle.
my gosh.
Yeah. Now, Bjorn, I don't have an answer for Bjorn. He's described as a man we have to answer the question about, is he a man or a bear, right? But
if you start to think about that, you could almost match some of these changes up to specific Valar.
Exactly. Yeah. No, we could do that. The question is, so that's really the question. The question is, what do we want to do? And I hope everybody sees why I'm talking about this now. This is not a digression, because
it's actually pretty key.
We should tease this. If it's going to happen, if it's part of Eru's plan, we could show that. I know we're going to have the fall of men happen largely off screen. I think we need at least one scene in Hildorian to show that the men are there. I don't think we need to show the whole thing, and I think probably the fall itself we don't show, but I think we need at least a glimpse of. Do you know
how Yavanna goes back to Eru after Aule, and she's like, "Well, I want some of my own," kind of thing. I mean, what stops them from having another conversation at this point about the men? It could be along the lines of I don't know. Having the elves only be one kind is not really working out very well for the good of Middle Earth. Like having one strain of elves, maybe, could we do, Dear Eru, like Yavanna, I could see going, because that's what I'm thinking about the Bjornings, could I, could you, like you did for the plants and animals, could I have a strain of men that I could protect and oversee.
Right.
You know, something like that, to where they're making an argument of let's have more than one strain here.
Right.
Or I don't know. That's just.
I'm also just thinking, rather than even making it kind of tactical in that way, it could simply be men are sort of more changeable than elves anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it could just be a natural result of one of the Valar establishing a relationship with a group of men, right?
Well, that's true.
That they over time begin to have they're
much in the sense of the way Orome had kind of a soft spot for the elves, right?
Yeah.
Different Valar could have something similar.
Hakon's suggestion is a fun suggestion. What if the hobbits are blessed by Tom Bombadil?
I was just going to say we need to bring Tom Bombadil in here somewhere, and I'm not quite sure how to do that. Is this where Tom Bombadil shows up? Is this where he, that's an interesting idea.
That is an interesting idea.
And it makes him almost a Vala as opposed to a Maya, doesn't it?
Well, and we don't know exactly his relative stature,
Or Eru. Hasn't there been people say that they thought he was Eru? There's that.
There's that. I mean, he's clearly not, but yeah.
What?
Well,
you think Eru wouldn't wear yellow boots? Oh my, come on.
I'm not saying that. It's not about the boots. He's not above yellow boots, and I think if he wore yellow boots, he would really enjoy it. But I'm not. So that's not the reason. Yeah. Anyway, the problem that I have is with the geographical fixation or fixity of Bombadil, right? He's not going to travel about. Right. And the hobbits are going to end up near him, but they're not going to start out near him. So
well, but he did actually travel some, because when he reminisces with the hobbits, doesn't he talk about like Fangorn and all that stuff? I mean, he
knows about stuff, but I don't know how often he travels around.
Okay. All right.
But yeah. No, I kind of.
I mean, I'm a good example of that. I was a nomad in my younger days, and look at me now. I'm like static, right? So I mean, he may have traveled earlier and then decided to settle down, right?
Yeah, no, we can do that. We can have him, though. It's a little bit having the idea of showing Tom Bombadil being a Rolling Stone is a little bit weird, right? Just having Tom Bombadil randomly coming in and out of various places, I think, is going to be jarring even for people who are familiar with Tom Bombadil. It could be like
in the Marvel Universe movies, right?
Right, exactly. Well, we'd already talked about it, cameos for him all over the place, but
yeah. Well, I mean, we could do the Adventures of Young Tom as well. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to have always been in this particular shape that we know him in.
That's true. It's true. Well, we'll think. We don't have to decide that right now. The question we have to decide is
we have to have it. Marie, we need a session called "The Question of Tom" at some point.
Yeah, we need to figure out about Tom Bombadil, especially if we're going to bring him in here. But anyway, but the point is, we need to figure out: is this part of Iluvatar's plan, or is this a result of their interactions? I like the idea of it being a result of their interactions in many ways. I think that seems logical that would happen. That that they would change in those ways, that there would be. So thinking about the Druidine, for instance, the Pukelmen, who have certain abilities which it's hard not to call magical, right? They would have received some blessings, and also, but there would be some cost to that as well. Like they have been blessed in particular. It's hard to explain how they are, in any other way than as, having sort of received the blessing of unless Iluvatar has chosen to bless them in particular ways that he didn't others for some reason that we'd have to explain, right? But anyway, so
actually you're right. I mean, I think from that standpoint, the Valar being part of
it makes more sense. But here's the argument against that. My argument against it is once you open that can, where do you stop? Like, why don't all of the Valar each go and adopt like a group of people? And if they did, where are they? I mean, I guess we could have like, you know, I don't know, like Vanna's dancing people off in the east somewhere, you know, and we can kind of tease it. As I said, I don't have any reason to believe that there necessarily aren't special people who are elsewhere down the road. And come to think of it, it would give us a really cool opportunity to have like some pretty awesome boss bad guys down the road if there's like other sub races of humans who are corrupted out in the east and then end up being like the bizarre elite semi-magical warriors of, you know, the empire of Sauron and that kind of thing.
Or that end up becoming Nazgul, or, you know, a strains that become Nazgul. I mean, he's kind of, I don't mean, you know, like one of that strain becomes a Nazgul.
Becomes a Nazgul,
you know?
Absolutely, yeah. No, there's a whole bunch of Nazgul that we have.
Like the Witch King, for example. Yeah. I mean, he could come from a strain of men like you're talking about, that were given some kind of powers.
We are going to get the opportunity to invent backstories for each of the 9 Nazgul, which is going to be awesome. And I cannot even begin to describe how much better of a job we are going to do of that than certain video games I won't mention. Absolutely. So I think...
Erebor, the gateway to Angmar. Sorry.
Yeah. Anyway, the point is, I feel like everyone seems to be getting into the idea of the Valar influence explanation. The other thing I would say about this is it certainly gets us into less theological territory, right? If Eru designed them, right? If he created men from the beginning with these sort of sub-races, there has to be like a reason for that. And at some point, we're going to have to wonder why that was, right?
Right.
So that's fine. Okay. So I say, all right, Tony wants the hobbits to be Vanna's people. Okay. Well, all right. We don't have to settle any of that right now, but I'm game with that. Let's do it. Let's go with it. It also does make sense, as Marie points out, as to why the different sub-races of men should still all be under the category of the second children. Marie's suggesting that it would kind of look, if he created the men, right? And then he's like, you know, then he creates the Druidine, and then it's like, are those like the third children and the fourth children? And
that makes it really difficult to
make
or he goes, or it's like, oops, no, here,
exactly.
Oops, no,
right.
Let me try another one. Oops,
right. Humans 3.0, humans 4.0, like he just keeps screwing it up. Yeah, no, exactly. And again, we have to give some explanation for all that, and I don't think we want to go there. Better, I think, it does show a more, like, originally they're all the same. Right. And they're going to change over time. They're going to change under the influence of different people, but they're still all going to be in the same category. And it makes it easier for us to capture that, you know, to say that even though there's going to become significant variations, you know, from like the 8-foot tall Númenórean down to the 3-foot tall Hobbit, you know, still they're all men, right? They're all part of the second children of Ilúvatar. I think if we have them all start off being, you know, all waking up there in Hildorian, then that's going to be good. That's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Shoot. Okay, just thought of another issue with depicting. See, what a wonderful illustration this is of the kind of challenge that you get when you're telling a story in a visual medium as opposed to telling in a story. If we were just telling this in a story, we can say, so then the men developed a paradisical society, and we could describe the paradisical society and how the men all lived there in harmony. And you know, we don't have to show actual actors and human beings with like hair and skin color on screen, right? But we do have to show that. So do we have Hildorian be ethnically diverse?
Oh, that's a good question.
Presumably.
I would think we would. Yeah.
I think we'd have to, probably.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know. See, if I were writing this in prose, I would so dodge that question. Not only just for political correctness purposes, but just because it'd be kind of cooler just to keep that mysterious, right?
Yeah.
So that you can just create it makes it a more mythic story, right? To sort of have this not to describe physically what like the proto-humans looked like, so that, you can kind of wonder and imagine like what did the proto-human look like. Yeah, we're going to have to think about that. Yeah. Well, I'm going to turf that one to the discussion boards and see what we think about that, because it is going to have a direct impact on season 5, right? With the Edain who are going to come across into Beleriand, and the Easterlings who are going to come and fight, on Morgoth's side later on. We have to think about visual ethnicity with those as well. So it's a question that's going to be relevant pretty soon, not this season, but pretty soon. So I'm going to turf that to the discussion boards and let them discuss it, and then we'll come back with that later on, because like I said, it's a challenge. It's a challenge that you normally wouldn't have to face, and it's one of the I think it's a really cool illustration, as I was saying, of how it's easier to tell a mythic story in prose than it is in a visual medium. It's really hard to capture myth in a visual medium, because you have to make everything so concrete, right? I mean, thinking back to the way that Tolkien talked about this, he wasn't talking about myth in exactly these terms, but when he was talking about this stuff on fairy stories, right? Like in a story, you can just say the word bread and say that there's bread, right? But if you're doing this on stage or in a film, you have to have an actual loaf of, so you have to decide, is it white bread or brown bread? What shape is the loaf, right? You have to have an actual physical loaf, which means no other loaf of bread could be it. Whereas in a story, you can just say the word bread, which is in its way, has a lot of kind of mythic implications to it, right? So you can it's easier to make that broad mythic appeal to the human imagination in prose for this reason. Anyway, a little sidebar. Okay. So we'll think more about that for later on. So I'm cool with, so we're going to have the humans, whether they're going to be ethnically diverse, like whether they're going to have different skin tones or not, we're going to have the humans of Hildorian not yet, we're not going to have hobbits in Hildorian. We're not going to have Druidine in Hildorian. They're all going to be of the same sub-race in Hildorian. And the kind of diversities that we're going to see among the human population will be the result of later interventions, which don't have to happen for at least hundreds of years, which is to say at least a couple of seasons here. So we don't have to worry about that just now. So, okay. Great. So we're making slow progress on the Hildorian question. So what happens in Hildorian? We get a lot. Tolkien wrote a lot about this, actually. In fact, we get a whole narrative. In fact, we get a couple whole narratives about this in Morgoth's Ring later on. And we also get some early stuff in the Lost Tales about the initial awakening and discovery of men and their initial temptation and that kind of thing. So near the beginning and near the end of Tolkien's career, he wrote some good stuff about the fall of men. I would like to lean on some of the stuff that he did at the end when he wrote about the stuff in Morgoth's Ring. It's very Garden of Eden like. It's clearly patterned on the Garden of Eden, and ultimately they are brought to worship Morgoth. They are corrupted and brought to worship Morgoth. I agree with sticking to that. So discussion board has some concrete suggestions about this. We do know that Sauron is a good tempter and giver of gifts. So let me address this question first. So my first question, is it Morgoth alone, or is Sauron involved in the corruption of men? I'm not sure I like the idea of Sauron being involved. And here's the reason I don't like it. What I don't like about it is I think it's too early to suggest that Sauron is better at this stuff than Morgoth is. Yes, Sauron is a great tempter. Yes, he's a good giver of gifts and stuff, and kind of teasing, the Anatar parallels and stuff is kind of fun, but we have lots of opportunities to do stuff like that. And I don't want to yet there's nothing yet Sauron can do that Morgoth can't do. And I think that Morgoth can be a tempter still. And I think that he is certainly still capable and wily enough to do this. Tony says he still likes the idea of Sauron being the serpent in the garden. Tony, to me, the primary virtue of that choice, of having this be involved with Sauron from the beginning, is thinking about Sauron's role later on. Remember how he's going to declare himself the king of men? If he sort of feels like, man, I've been in charge of this human being project from day one, right? If that gives him sort of the justification for feeling like, he has kind of ownership over this whole thing, I would certainly say that Sauron would want to do this, especially fitting this into the shape of what we've had Sauron doing so far, because he had his elf corruption / seduction / necromantic project going on earlier on, which Morgoth wrecked, right? So Second Children of Iluvatar being like Sauron's corrupting experiment 2.0, right, makes a lot of sense. I would easily see Sauron loving that idea and being involved in that plan, or wanting to be involved in that plan. And Maria, I know that Morgoth can't change into a fair shape, but I'm not sure he needs to change into a fair shape. All he has, but he can still adopt a fair voice and speak to them out of the darkness. And that would be sufficiently impressive and be scary, but not just scary, also enticing, right? He would just be the voice who would then manifest himself in his terrifying but brilliant form. I love the emphasis on the Silmarils in the darkness, right? The humans don't have any light technology. I think they probably have fire, but I don't think they have anything other than fire. And then here comes Morgoth with the radiant Silmarils. The idea of him, the idea of Morgoth utilizing the Silmarils in order to give himself a kind of beautiful appearance, right? Maybe all they see is the beautiful light of the Silmarils before they see his terrible form, right? And so there can be kind of 3 stages, right? Where first he's the voice, then he's the light. And remember, light is what he's about, right? A light is what he claims ownership over. So he would claim to be the true light, right? And then he would use the Silmarils to show that light. And then he would, which we have to remember, the light of the Silmarils still has to be in some qualitative way different from sunlight, right? And from other light. Exactly, Marie. We have him be the counter to the voice of Iluvatar. Exactly. And then he reveals himself. So I certainly reject the idea that Morgoth isn't capable of doing this on his own, that he needs Sauron or else it's not going to work out. I do think Sauron would want to do it. I think that Sauron's going to sneak over there and stick his oar in whether Morgoth invites him to or not. At the very least, he's going to spy on it see what Morgoth is up to, and think about how he can, have the seeds of him thinking how he can feather his own nest with this. So, I think also, here's the other thing, my other hesitation for having Sauron involved. He's not the serpent. He's not the devil figure, right? He's the poser devil figure. He's the wannabe devil figure. He's the fake, ultimately. He's putting himself up like he's the big evil one, but he's not the big evil one. He's the mini evil one. And I don't want there... So, on the one hand, having him be the original tempter of men would give him a kind of legitimacy when he claims to be the king of men, but that's my problem. Give me too much legitimacy, I think. When he comes back generations later and sets himself up, what he would do is say, like, I am, remember that God whom you all bowed down and worshiped generations ago? I'm back, right? I am he, but he's lying, right? He'd have to pose as Morgoth to do that. And I would want that kind of fraud to be at the heart of his relationship with human beings. He's always got to deceive them. He's not the big bad, and he knows it, but he is fooling others and eventually himself into believing that he's the big bad. But he's not. So, and yeah, he likes to cast himself as high priest to Morgoth worship. Marie, you're right, we do get that with Numenor, and I think we can see him adopting that role. Maybe that's the way that he comes in. I would think that would probably be the way that he comes in to the humans down the road, right, when he's reconverting them. He can certainly at least once play that role. But this is why I'm just Trish, what do you think about this? You see my reluctance here to involve Sauron directly?
Yeah, I do. I the other thing, I was away for just a couple of seconds because I had a call, but I want to really be careful about us getting too Earth related. In other words, like the biblical.
Close, yeah.
Tolkien
establishes it as a parallel, but it's not a direct retelling. It's not a direct retelling.
Yeah, he said that, right? Yeah. That these are not the antecedents of humans on Earth, kind of thing.
Well, yeah.
If anything, it's like we can maybe think of it as like was it Lewis's alternate, other worlds,
right?
A different world. But because it's just, I think it'd be really tempting for folks to really take the Bible and run with it, kind of thing. And I think I like your idea of trying to like veer away from that if we can.
Well, which we Tolkien does more of that in Morgoth's Ring than almost anywhere. Like when he tells the fall story in Morgoth's Ring, it's more Bible-y than any other story.
But don't you think? Haven't you told me that that's like, as years went by and he kind of got like pushed on by priests and his own fellow Catholics? That he became a little bit more Catholic with a small c, maybe, in his telling of.
In some ways, I don't know. It's hard. I can see some inconsistencies in Tolkien's thought in his later years, where sometimes, like, he certainly doesn't push the historical, right? There's this kind of vague idea that Middle-earth is like prehistorical humans, right? That it's our actual world, and it's just what happened long ago. In a land far away, and we don't really know about it anymore, and now is the dominion of men, and we've forgotten all of those things. That's of course, like, that idea of like why there are still memories of elves in the land and stuff is part of the original impetus of the story back in the Lost Tales. So, as more and more pressure gets put on that, he does seem to me to kind of back away from that little bit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are other times when he doesn't, right? And and in Morgoth's Ring, actually, in the volume of Morgoth's Ring, I think we can see that in a couple different ways. One, in this, when he's telling the story of the fall of man, he kind of realizes like, well, okay, if this is supposed to be the historic, like, prehistory of men, then like the fall of man is the fall of man, right? So I mean, so he does kind of go back to the Bible much more. But secondly, there's the astronomical stuff, right? Where he's like, well, if this is the prehistory of our planet, we can't really do the flat Earth thing, so we've got to have.
I did that. Sorry, I did the movie.
So we've got to make it the solar system from the get-go, and all that, and so I think we can see, I don't think that he totally made up his mind about this, right? On the one hand, he's like, for story purposes, it's easier to just kind of separate it from our world. But he did also have that impulse to say, like, well, if it's not separated, then what has to happen, and how do we have to change stuff? And, I mean,
I would think we could show, there's different ways that a supernatural being can bring about the fall of mortals. It doesn't necessarily just have to be the one.
Yeah.
I'm thinking we show, that there's another, that this happened this way. The fall still happened, but it came about this other way, kind of thing. I don't know.
Well, and ultimately, the outline of the fall, I think, is pretty clear, right? From the given what we have, and I don't mean pretty clear thinking about the Bible parallel at all. I mean, from the world that we've created, and by the way, we've already made a decision. Right, we decided to go with the flat Earth, which means we've already rejected Tolkien's later impulse to go back to round world to round Earth astronomy from the very beginning, right? And also,
doesn't Sauron kind of hook them not so much on sort of the tree of knowledge sort of thing, or the knowledge of good and evil and all that, but the mortality thing? The fact that, the fear of death, look what he did to you thing.
And the fear of the darkness. Yeah, exactly. Right. Which is connected with the fear of death. Yes.
Right.
Yes. That's one of the tricky bits, theologically speaking, and one of the places where he had more interesting discussions with priests afterwards.
True.
That was the biggest. I mean, if there is one place... if there's one place where Tolkien's
sort of ran afoul of,
well, is least theologically compatible, and people can mention. Marie was just talking about the Valar. Valar are not a problem. The Valar are not a problem because the existence of the Valar and their custodial relationship with the world is actually not very different from medieval Catholic.
Angels thing, and see, angelic, or
yes, angelic. This is so when Tolkien said they're not really angels, he's referring to Catholic angelology.
Angels.
Right. So there's the heavenly hosts, right, and there's this whole hierarchy among them. Angels are the lowest level. There are 9, according to medieval Catholic theology. There are 9 different grades. Hierarchical grades of angelic beings. The angels are literally number 9. They're the lowest, and the archangels are the second lowest. Okay, so the angels are like the bottom of the angelic food chain, and they have like a specific job. And so when Tolkien was saying the Valar aren't angels, what he's saying is that's not their job. They don't have that job. Right, because the job of the angels, that lowest rank of the angelic hierarchy, they're messengers, and that's not what the Valar do. They're not messengers. What the Valar are like are the planetary intelligences, which are way higher up on the food chain, and they act very much like planetary intelligences, who are very much like the Greco-Roman gods. In fact, that's exactly what the medieval explanation was. They were not just Christianizing I mean, they were, but it's not just about Christianizing. What they were saying was like, well, the gods that the Greco-Roman peoples worship, they were super wise, those ancient Greco-Roman folks. They perceived something real about how the world works. Like, there is a spirit called Venus, which influences the world in certain ways, and a spirit Mars, which influences the world in certain ways. They just didn't understand how like the Greco-Romans didn't understand how they fit into the big picture, right? And how they fit into the big picture are delegated authorities under God, right? And this, of course, is this whole Christian worldview is articulated most clearly in C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy with the Eldil. Anyway, so that's that. So the mere existence of Valar does not is no conflict with Catholic theology, and this is why there are some times when I get not grumpy, but like Tolkien's statement, like when he sometimes says they're like angels and then says they're not like angels, and it's not a contradiction; it's a technical distinction. But like when he says those things, he's relying on so much like Catholic and medieval history that modern people don't have. That
even Catholics don't necessarily have.
Yes,
like
exactly.
Modern day Catholics. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, Bree, exactly. C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy is where we get this stuff most clearly, and I think that it is not at all difficult to see a similarity between the Valar in Tolkien and, Oyarsa, Malacandra and Paralandra and everybody in Lewis's Space Trilogy. Anyway,
yeah, that is actually
I
think that a lot of people, especially the more casual Tolkien fans, don't understand is he was a medievalist.
Right.
Really only makes sense if you put it in the context of medieval Catholicism, culture, whatever. You've got to remember that he was a medievalist.
Yes.
He's not just like a fiction writer.
Yes. And yeah, exactly. And yes, Marielle, this does come up. Lewis explains the business about the planetary intelligences and stuff in the discarded image. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Anyway, bringing it back in here, the point is, we've already made a choice to say that the history of Middle-earth is not exactly the same as our planet.
Mm-mm. Right.
Because we've done the flat Earth thing, and we're going to do the enrounding of the Earth thing at the end of Numenor. Which Tolkien saw brightly doesn't fit in with, the modern view of our world, right? And so it's harder to make that fit, even mythically, anymore. Anyway, point is, we've already kind of drawn a line in the sand there.
Yeah.
So, okay. Coming back to the specific question.
In terms of the fall of men, right?
Yes,
that's what we're talking
in terms
about,
of the fall of men, the key issue, this has to be dependent. Our version of the fall of men, I think, has to flow naturally from the character of the bad guys as we have developed them, right? Why do the bad guys want to corrupt men, and in what ways do they want to corrupt them? And I think we have two factors here. First, we have Morgoth's grand plan, right? Melkor's grand plan, I should say. The grand plan that he had when he was Melkor, to say, I will establish order and dominion over the entire world. It just needs to obey me, and then we can get going, right? His insistence that he has the plan and he has to be in control. And if everybody agrees with him, and that he has the power and the strength and is the only one who has the strength and therefore the right to be able to rule over all things and to order all things as he wills. So on the one hand, he would very naturally see that this other species of people should obviously worship him, right? Because he would consider them lesser than the elves, I think, right? They're lesser in the sense of being mortal. They're lesser in the sense of being weaker. And, so there's he would see that the advantages that they have. And here's a topic I am not ready to discuss today. The question of the freedom of the will of men. Here's me bouncing right over that. But whatever, the point is, he's not going to value it.
We should get Verlin on the podcast to discuss it with you.
Yeah.
I can just kick back and let the two of you go for it.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna wimp right out on that one. But anyway, Verlin would eviscerate me on this topic. But my point is that Morgoth is not going to really think about or value that. I think that Morgoth is going to kind of overlook that. I think he's going to see them as weaker tools. But they're going to be tools, right? He's going to just choose to dominate them. His goal with them will be to have them worship him as God. First of all, because he's kind of into that, right? He wants everyone to sort of submit to him. He's not expecting like Manwë to worship him, just obey him, right? Just submit to him, just be his underling. But the lesser creatures, which he would use the words like lesser, certainly Morgoth would, he would expect to worship him. And he would be putting himself in place of Iluvatar, right? He does not want them to have any knowledge of or allegiance to Iluvatar. He would want to be in that role. He would want them to worship him as God because he's the rightful ruler of Middle-earth, everybody knows, right? So as the two threads here are first his initial plan, right? But also the corruption. He's sliding downhill, right? And he himself is becoming corrupted, and his initial, like, I think I have the best plan, and I humbly believe that I am the most qualified person to carry this out, so everybody should come along with me. And the way that we were playing that out in season 1, right, that has been sliding already, right, and has now just been like, nobody's obeying me, I'm ticked off. Well, some people are obeying me, but not enough people are obeying me, and I'm ticked off, and I'm just going to stomp on people who are opposing me. And he's becoming more and more delusional about his role and more insistent upon worship and more and more abject submission.
Right.
Originally just needed allegiance, right?
Because I said so.
Right, exactly. More and more he will be. So that he wants to set himself up as tyrant of the humans, and he's perfectly happy to be a benevolent tyrant, in strengthening them in various ways to become his most effectual possible tools, right? So it's not just like he's going to stomp them. Yeah, because they're instruments, right? He's gonna forge them into his instruments. Which means if we talk about the Valar changing humans, would there be some humans that were changed by Morgoth's direct intervention? Or Sauron's?
Interesting question. Yeah. Well, again, back to the Witch King. Back to where did the Witch King get his powers, you know?
Yes, back to the... yeah. Okay, anyway. All right. So, there's... yes. Anyway, we don't have to worry about that just now, but just couldn't help but think of that in light of our earlier conversation. So the dynamic of the fall of man, he is going to try to win their allegiance, not just to dominate them, but it's going to be, just as he himself can't take a fair form, there's always going to be an element of fear. And he's going to be kind of okay with that. He doesn't want their love, right? He wants their obedience. Maybe back in the day, maybe if this were season 1, he would try to get them to love him, right? He would
adore him. I don't know about loving, but they would.
Yeah, well, exactly. He would try to get them to adore him. He would have thought of a more kind of imagined a genuinely positive, because I mean, he still sees himself as like the natural leader of a worldwide utopia, which he's attempting to set up, right? Back in his Autumno days, that's how he might have thought about things, but now not so much, right? Now he wants to dominate. He wants their submission. He wants their obeisance before him, their absolute obedience. He's gonna build them up. He's gonna make promises which he's prepared to keep to them if they obey him. Okay, so I think, as tempting as it is to have Sauron involved, I really think this should be Morgoth's project. I do think that Sauron should snoop on his project. I think that Sauron should be checking in and taking notes. I think that Sauron should be thinking about how he can, and I do think that...
Well, he doesn't want another orc mess up, right? Also.
Yeah.
So that would be a reason.
Yeah, I think that Sauron should be taking notes, should be looking for opportunities for himself, even thinking about, again, as time goes on, we could imagine Sauron creating a landing spot for himself. If, when it looks like things might go downhill in one way or another, either Morgoth become totally mad, or he might fear more. Here's another division between Morgoth and Sauron that we can develop over the next few years, right? as Morgoth goes further and further down the road, he will fear the Valar less and less, deluding himself into thinking that he has absolute dominion and they will never dare to come against him again. Sauron could be increasingly looking over his shoulder across the sea and being like, at some point or other, right, it's going to hit the fan. Like, they're going to come. Sooner or later, this is, he could eventually be like, I can't believe it's taking this long, but he's going to be thinking that they're going to come. And so this is why he vanishes, right? And so Tony, I think that this is not about him usurping the project at the time, because again, Morgoth is going to be too with it. We can't show Morgoth being weak yet. He's not weak yet. He just has right now still the potential for weakness, or, we're seeing where the openings are going to come. Instead, he's going to be, Sauron is going to, like, again, in future generations, this is where I think he goes. I think he goes here, at least to visit after he flees from Beleriand. Yeah.
He could even do he could even do the, I come to you as an emissary of Morgoth. I mean, they don't know that Morgoth's been banished, right? I mean, I could totally see him, like, doing that kind of thing. So in that respect, that does underline even more so that it's Morgoth that makes the first impact.
Yes.
Not Sauron.
Yes. Yes. Sorry, I'm just thinking, there was a question that was asked like ages ago at the very beginning of the broadcast when we were talking about this, which is an excellent question, which we should think about, which is how long does Myron always think of himself as Myron?
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Does he begin to identify himself as Sauron at some point? Sauron is
He does at some point, doesn't he? Does he do it at this point?
The elves are going to start calling him Sauron, right? And maybe it's in season 4 that happens, when the catch and release plot is revealed and he is seen to be the one in charge of that. So basically, and hey, folding this back into the question of the Hildorian plot and its relation to season 4, I think Morgoth should be away for the front half of the season. I think the first half of the season leading up to the Dagor Aglareb, he goes away. And when he's away, he basically leaves Gothmog and Sauron to their own devices, right? Y'all do you, right? You have forces under your control. We've still got, Gothmog still has the Balrogs and all the orcs. And Sauron has his little, group and stuff. So Morgoth basically says, I've got to go do a thing, right? You guys see what you can do, right? And this is like a way for him to, Morgoth would be thinking like, let's see which lieutenant rises to the top, right? Let's see who does best if I leave them on their own. The fact that they might fight against each other, he's not going to care so much, right? He knows he can bring them both into line when he comes home. And anyway, it would be a way of proving who's stronger and better, right? So, sure. So, okay, so he leaves them. So that's when so Gothmog is like, okay, let's move on to the invasion plan. So he's making the invasion plan, which leads to the Dagor Aglareb ultimately, right? That is the final end of Gothmog's plan, which of course doesn't pan out really well. Sauron, meanwhile, starts the catch and release program. So those are the two initiatives that they're doing. And they're kind of working together, right? Especially with the Eldolate subplot and the Anael, I am revealing the secrets of the elves and helping to set up the battles and stuff. That subplot too. So all of those subplots are in the first half of the season. Then we get the battle, and after the battle, so Morgoth comes back from the corruption of men and just to find like all of the armies of the orcs destroyed, and he's like, oh great, yeah, great. Put Gothmog in charge and look what happens. And so I would think that he would in the end, like Sauron basically wins. Sauron comes out of that as the more competent lieutenant of the two. It's clear that Gothmog's, Iron Fist approach is not panning out, at least not just with orcs, right? So we need to. So Gothmog loses that exchange. He doesn't have to get totally demoted. But thinking forwards to what's going to be happening next, it makes a certain amount of sense because the Dagor Aglareb is going to be the last of the great, huge disasters for Sauron's or Morgoth's forces. Most of the rest of the major initiatives in the war are going to go well for Morgoth, right? Mm-hmm. In the Dagor Bragalach and the Nirnaeth Arnoediad. So, having him from then on using Gothmog primarily as a captain, right, on the field, as we see him acting, of course, in the Nirnaeth Arnoediad when he kills Fingon. And we can have him involved in the Dagor Bragalach as well. So from a military standpoint, things start going better for Morgoth when he takes over. And of course, what we see is that things are different, right? In the later battles, we don't just have, and now another orc invasion, which is what the Dagor Aglareb is, right? And that can be sort of Gothmog's kind of dumb idea, but it's not I don't want to make Gothmog into an idiot, right? I mean, he's not, he's straightforward and just believes in force and strength. But he's not a moron, and so we have the sort of subtle the pincher movement thing that he's got with the orcs coming in from the north, and Sauron can come see, and Sauron's plan, Sauron gets Eldolante involved in the Dagor Aglareb plot because Sauron is Sauron comes out of it looking really good because Sauron is playing it both ways, right? If the orc invasion of Gothmog fails, he wins, right? Because it's obvious that his plans were way better than Gothmog's. But by involving some of his captured and released elves in the Dagor Aglareb plot, he also wins if it works, right? So then if Gothmog's invasion plan works, he can be like, yeah, it worked because of my plot, my devious plot, which made it happen, right? So even if Gothmog's initiative works out, Sauron still comes out looking good, whereas Sauron looks even better if Gothmog's plan doesn't succeed. So that seems to me like a cunning plan for Sauron, but basically the elves don't know about the super secret necromantic orc project. Right? I mean, there can be hints and suggestions, maybe, but he never got to unleash them. He never did anything with them. So his name, the name Sauron, which is given to him by the elves, is, I think that needs to be given to him now in season 4. They will come to know that he is involved, that there is this devious evil one who is behind all of these horrible plots that are turning them. So they give him the name so at the end of the catch and release program, like in the midpoint of season 4, after the Dagor Aglareb, when they're like, okay, hey, we won, the threat is defeated, right? And we've now proven that Morgoth can't come against us in arms. There will be those wiser ones among the elves who are like, okay, yeah, but we didn't defeat the really serious enemy, right? The really serious enemy is the one who's been doing this catch and release program, who's been corrupting our people and setting us against each other. And he is Sauron, right? And they give him the name. So I do think we haven't had that before. We haven't had his name before, have we? Did we talk? I know we've talked about his name before.
I don't think so.
But I don't think we had elves calling him by his name before. Anyhow, so I'm thinking we can do that. So Morgoth comes back from Hildorian after the Dagor Aglareb and is like, okay, what's been going on? Oh, great. All of my orc armies are destroyed. That's just fantastic. Thank you for that, Gothmog. Okay. So Marie says Gothmog gave it to him as a derisive nickname, right? Okay, I knew we talked about it then in some way. It would be cool, I think, actually, to have the elves like come up with it on their own. Basically, it's the same name, right? It's like they end up calling him. It's almost like like Baron, he called her by her elvish name, right? Like it's like they like it, or maybe they can hear it. Maybe one of the orcs, they can hear it from one of the orcs or something. But so they either adopt it. I kind of like the idea that they give it to him and it's the same name. Maybe that looks like too much of a coincidence to not look hokey in the context of a production. But anyway, one way or another, the elves, it should come into circulation among the elves at this point in the midpoint of season 4. So Morgoth comes back and it's like, okay, human beings corrupted, worshiping me, all is going well. How are things going up? Oh, good grief. Okay, fine. Back to the freaking drawing board in Angband, and that's when he starts in with the dragon plot, right? Now, okay, so, yeah, Mariel points out that Gothmog is an Ainu, right? So there's no reason he can't occasionally have insight into the song or of the future. Yeah, exactly. So his calling Sauron by that name is like he knows that Sauron is going to have that name, right? So, yeah, I kind of like that actually, but we'll see. We'll see what do the discussion boards think about that? Whether we should have it like the name leak out, or whether we should just have it be that Gothmog's naming of him was a prefiguring of the name that he was gonna be given by the elves, which I kind of like, but whatever. Okay, so then the last question, and if let me close the Sauron in Hildorian question by simply saying I'm not immovably set against Sauron being involved, but I need to be convinced. If y'all want to if somebody still wants to try to convince me, you can, but I need good reasons to think how this is not going to lessen Morgoth, because I don't think Morgoth should be diminished yet. He is more than cunning enough and more than powerful enough to carry this off himself without needing Sauron's help. So I think it's important that we have him not needing Sauron's assistance here. And secondly, I want Sauron to be a fraud when he sets himself up later on. I think there needs to be an element of deception, both of others and even of himself, when he is setting himself up as the god king of the world later on. And I don't see how we can do that. I think that we're undermining that. I think we're setting him up too far if we make him actually the deceiver, who has that kind of instrumental role at the beginning.
Yeah.
So anyway, convince me otherwise, and I'm happy to reconsider. But those are the reasons why I feel pretty strongly about not having Sauron involved. Now, this other question, Thungkill as cult leader in Hildorian. So he's going to leave. Morgoth is going to leave, and neither Morgoth nor Sauron can hang around Hildorian forever, right? They've got to come back to Beleriand. They both have jobs to do. So, what's he going to do? Is he going to set up a king there? There needs to be somebody in charge. Thungkill is the name of the evil sorcerer, shady dude who is involved in the corruption of man way back in the Lost Tales version of the story, if I'm recalling that correctly. It was one of the early like bad guy figures, in a sense, a precursor of Sauron, in that, like, one of these like wizardly, vaguely necromantic kind of bad guy figures that Tolkien had way back. Bad guy figures who were not Morgoth. That he would find somebody conveniently immortal rather than just having to rely on the succession, who could supervise things and become the kind of cult leader there in Hildorian to keep them all towing the Morgothian line down there in Hildorian while Morgoth is away. That makes sense. My uneasiness about Thungkill, I have no necessary objection to bringing him in, apart from the fact that we got to invent another character again. So my first question is always, can we do a conservation of characters here? Again, in that if we try to cast not only every character in the Silmarillion, but every character that was ever cut from the Silmarillion, our cast is going to become truly ludicrous. So is there an existing, I mean, we've already added Tevildo back, right? We've already resurrected Tevildo out of the off the cutting room floor, right? So we've got a bunch of bad guy figures, right? And so Bulldog and Tevildo both we've rescued from the cutting room floor. We could do that with Funkil as well. I would just want to make sure that we absolutely need him, because it's a lot of people. So the question would be, A, do we absolutely have to have somebody in this role? And B, could we spare someone else? Well, but let me think about that first question first. Do we need somebody in this role? And one step further with that, what would be his ultimate outcome, right? If there is a sort of, lesser spirit, right? Somebody on the like Bulldog, Tevildo, Thuringwethil level, right? Who is deputized to be the leader of the men in Hildorian, what happens to him? Where is he? Where does he go? I mean, we're going to run into trouble if he's still around. Is he going to become Sauron's rival later on? Are we going to have a whole Funkil v Sauron, struggle for dominance in the continent when Sauron goes over there? Do we want to do that? I kind of think we don't. I kind of like the plot that we came up with earlier today when we're talking about Sauron having to go and reconvert the populace every few generations. When they're remembering they have the myths and stories and their traditions of the old fearful god that they worshipped. And we can kill him off, Murray, but if we kill him off, we got to find a way to do that. He's not going to die of old age, right? So we've got to find it. We've got to have a whole story then to kill him off. And do we want a whole nother human, like far away, still in the vague Hildorian region subplot where he somehow ends up getting destroyed? So yeah, I mean, the other alternative, Murray, would be leaving a human king, right? That he would inspire. Okay, how about this? How about Morgoth thinking back to what I was thinking before about how the interaction with the Valar shapes and changes the humans into hobbits and Druidine and whatnot? Maybe he would create a priestly caste among the humans of Hildorian, so he would bless a group of humans with longevity and power, right? And leave them in charge. And then we could have, so these would be like proto Dunedain, right? Who would be out there, who could survive. They'd be kind of like proto-Dunedain and almost like, not exactly proto-Ringwraiths, because he wouldn't make them immortal. But the survivors, or the descendants, that's the word I'm looking for, the descendants of this like priestly race that Morgoth establishes to rule over the people of Hildorian, could then become, we could have descendants of them involved in later actions, right? They could die out or almost die out, but they could have descendants who still pop up and cause trouble. And that would work. That seems like a Morgothian kind of plan, wouldn't it? I mean, he would be, because again, his whole pitch to the humans, which wouldn't be a lie, like in the sense that he'd believe it, right? He's not deceiving them. He's not just pulling the wool over their eyes. He would say, like, I have a vision for a better future, right? If you submit to me, then I'm gonna make you into the, you're gonna be awesome and you're gonna rule the world, and I'm gonna order things through, at least partly through you. And so he would be like, okay, I'm establishing that. And Marie, we can use the name Funkil, why not? Right? He would appoint a king. He would believe in monarchy. Right? So he would have a priest king. So he would bless this priestly, he would create the first subrace, right? So he would bless this priestly race who are they at least would be taller and stronger, and they would, I don't know what they could do. They breathe fire. I have no idea. They could have some kind of magic power, right? In their priestly duties. Light. Oh, light. He's the king of light, right? They should be radiant or able to, glow and stuff. They should have light. They should be the priests of light. That's totally what they should be. And then, and they have a priest king, right? Who is Funkil, right? Funkil is the name of the priest king, of them. There you go. That's it. Okay, so we have that, and then this is kind of fun. So instead of having dark, horned, evil-looking, fire-breathing, wicked priests, right? We have luminous, beautiful priests surrounded by a glowing white nimbus, right? Which would be really impressive. And exactly, Tony, for the nights are dark and full of terrors, and they're looking for light, and they're searching for. And so the split of the people of Hildorian, right? The Edain are the ones who believe that it's a lie. They see, okay, if we've been blessed, if this is, why are we they're still looking for an escape from death. Right? They're thinking hey, okay, this is not better than before. So they're the ones who say that, because they're looking for the true light, right? And they would say that the priests of light, this is not the true light, right? There is a real light. There is light and life beyond, off in the west. And off they go, right? So then they secede, and escape, at least, the dominance of Funkil, right? So, Trish, we could have the Witch King be a descendant of Funkil, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good idea.
That could be where the sorceress power and will of the Witch King comes from. Marie, exactly. The priests don't have the light of the Silmarils, so there can be there has to be this perception. It's not that the light isn't real light, because it's real light in the sense that it illuminates stuff, right? But it's not the true light. There can be I think they have to have a vision. I think that the Edain have to have some kind of calling, right? There has to be something. Because, what are they comparing it to, right? All they've seen is Morgoth and Morgoth's light. They should have some... Iluvatar needs to give to the people of Hildorian some kind of contrary vision, right? Some kind of seed of knowledge or memory or dream of a real and a true light, which is not the light of slavery and, of the dominion of Morgoth. And some of them believe in the vision and dream and go to find it, and others want to go in, others, reject it and stay. So Phil, I'm not making a direct connection between the magical abilities of the priestly caste here and of the Druidon. I'm just saying it's similar in the sense that they would be the first of these human subraces made by the influence of Avala, in this case, Morgoth, right? Because if the influence of Avalar can make subraces, Morgoth has got to be in on that, right? In fact, he kind of has to have done it first. So that makes a lot of sense. Maria, I do think he can make use of the eclipse, like in the Tale of Adonai, absolutely. But again, I would think that Morgoth would do that. I think he would reveal the Silmarils during the eclipse, right? And what he would show them is that, the sun itself is a lesser light, right? He has the true light. He is the true light. And the sun, and then he would make like he can command the sun, right? So that he would both be claiming his own supremacy over the sun, and how his light is better than the sun because the light of the Silmarils is going to look amazing during the fear of the eclipse, right? And then he looks like he can command the sun and bring the sun back. So he is totally in charge of light, obviously. So yeah, Morgoth would totally be able to organize that. Yeah. What's the mechanism of the vision, dream, message? Are the Valar involved? I'm thinking Iluvatar does this directly. I'm thinking a dream, right? They have a dream. They have a sort of a shared dream. When does the eclipse happen during season 4? Well, it should be a total eclipse in Hildorian and only a partial eclipse in Beleriand. Maybe the partial eclipse happens round about the time of the Merith Atherthat, right? It's a portent and they're not sure what to make of it. It could be the result of a direct attack on the sun. Morgoth, okay, because remember, it's an eclipse, right? But it's not just like, it's not the moon. Because again, we don't have round Earth astronomy here, right? So yeah, Marielle, exactly. I'm thinking about the attack on the moon, right? That we get in the Silmarillion an account of Morgoth's attack on the moon. So what if he plans to capitalize on that, right? So he's doing both things at once. He's organizing the attack on the moon and he's organizing the seduction of the men of Hildorian, and he capitalizes on the eclipse when it happens, or we make it an attack on the sun directly instead of an attack on the moon. I don't think that just because it's an eclipse doesn't mean the moon has to be involved necessarily, right? Again, we're not bound to regular solar system astronomy here. There's no reason that there couldn't be an eclipse that's caused by something else, like some shadow that Morgoth has attempted to place between the Earth and the sun. Yeah. Okay, so when does it happen? Yeah, I'm not quite sure, but I would think it would be visible, but not total. Like it's. He doesn't have the power to obscure the sun across the entire world, but he can create a blot, right, which will obscure the light of the sun over Hildorian, which is part of his plan, right? And maybe he's thinking that this is actually, so maybe that's an experiment as well. So like, again, Morgoth is way too smart to just be doing one thing at a time. So at the same time that he is using this phenomenon to cow the people of Hildorian, this is also a pilot project, right? And he's seeing about how can I, because of course, ever since the sun rose at the end of season 3, he's been thinking like, what do we do about this? And the whole cloud, localized cloud cover is kind of cool, but it's restrictive, right? So far better to be able to, if he can't destroy the sun itself, which he can't because he's afraid of Aryan, he could at least block it, right? Better to block it out further up, right? So it's an experiment that he's doing. It should be visible from Beleriand, but not not a total eclipse in Beleriand. Yeah. Okay, so they should see it, and they can see it as a portent, like, whoa, Morgoth's up to something. What was that? That was a little worrisome. And they then also have to worry about. Does is this a sign of worse to come? Like, does this mean that Morgoth is preparing to put out that sun, which has been so distinctly reassuring? William asks, would this weaken Morgoth in any way? Yeah, I would think he'd have to put out some pretty big power to obscure the sun even briefly. And maybe he doesn't do it because the drain on him is too much. and Aryan overcomes it, and he's a little scared of her, and that's how we can show him being scared of her, right? Aryan Aryan destroys his. Yeah. Instead of having him summon the sun, and instead of him having end the eclipse on call, he obscures the sun. His plan is to obscure the sun and to keep it obscured, like indefinitely if he can, and show them, or at least for quite some time, right? And then he shows them the Silmarils, and he has his really dramatic moment. And then the sun comes back, and he's got to improvise, right? Because Aryan counterattacks, and Aryan obliterates the thing that he's put in place to obliterate, to obscure the sun, and Aryan is clearly sending the message to him, like, any day, punk, you try that again, and we'll see what happens, right? And so we see he's not going to go after Aryan again. He is weakened. We see that, but the humans don't see it, right? He obscures it with the light, and he's smart, right? He's smart, and he's wily, and he's deceptive, and so he immediately turns it to effect and makes it look like he's resummoned the sun, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like all that. Marie, I love the idea of coming back to this. It would be really cool in episode 1 of season 5 to do the fall of man and Hildorian in more detail, with an emphasis on the rebellion of the Edain, right? So that we're kind of teasing it here in season 4, and having the bad guys kind of talk about it so we know what's going on, and we can have a couple glimpses of it maybe, but we don't get really the full story, and then we do get the full story at the beginning of season 5. Maybe we think about that. But anyway, not going to worry about that too much. Okay. This works. I like this. This is a good story. This is a good Fall of Man story we're coming up with here. I'm thinking this is good. This is good. Okay. Yeah, Tony's thinking that Aryan's counterattack looks like a massive solar flare. Yeah, no, we got some visuals. We can definitely work with that. Mortality and disease connected or unconnected to the fall. Well, now there's the thorny theological problem, isn't it? I think we go with the Aragorn solution to this problem. That humans are designed to be mortal. We just go with the published Silmarillion on that. Mortality is the plan for humans. But it was not meant to be fearful. Right? It was meant to be, humans were meant to submit to death like Aragorn is eventually going to, right? Like the Númenóreans do, so that we can show in Aragorn and in Númenor at the beginning a return to something like paradisal man, right? That's in a sense what the definition of, like, the defining element of unfallen man is, that willing, sort of cheerful, humble submission to death. So the fear of death is very much associated with the fall. And that doubt, that uncertainty, that fear is what Morgoth plays on and expands upon. And their desire to avoid it, their desire to cling to this world and not leave it at almost any cost, is going to be, of course, what's going to be characteristic of humans, and what is going to be the leading cause of trouble among humans for pretty much the rest of it. So Marie, yes, good. The Edain also fear death, but their fear of death it leads them to seek answers elsewhere, right? Because it's not panning out, right? At first, the new subrace, the priestly subrace, the luminous ones, right, that Morgoth creates, might appear to show promise for that, because they will live longer, like the Númenóreans, right? They could live several lifetimes of the rest of the men, but eventually they do die, right? And so the fact that even they die, which maybe could be kind of hushed up, maybe the priestly class tries to suggest that they are immortal, and so they conceal the fact of their own deaths, even though their own deaths do come eventually. And so the truth of that comes out. Even they die. This isn't working. This is a lie. And so the Edain leave, right? Maybe that's how it works. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. All right. This works. Man, we've gotten far deeper into this than I thought we would.
I know we have. I was thinking about that. Well, we've actually identified a lot of stuff that has to be thought of now.
Absolutely.
In order to make it make sense in the future. Otherwise, we get out there and it's like, oh, crap, we got to go back and figure out how to do this.
And I know we've seemed to wander around and talk about the second and third age a lot, but when you're talking about men, and I mean, we're putting things into motion that we're going to be following through on at the all the way through the third age. So I mean, we have to be thinking about things like the ring wraiths and everything else. Yeah. So, and people were asking about time. Yeah, we can have a few generations happen between the fall and the rebellion of the Edain, right? So that the shared dream can be happening, right? This is sort of, I mean, again, what we need to show in the Fall of Man is a recapitulation of Ilúvatar's message at the music, right? That like whatever Morgoth does, there's nothing that Morgoth does that will not redound to the glory of Ilúvatar, right? So we need to show Ilúvatar kind of undermining the fall of man in this way, right? Anyway, so yeah, a few generations happen before the Edain rebel and leave, and we're okay though. We've got time. We've got time for them to be able to. We've got time for them to be able to get to Beleriand by season 5. First of all, because I don't think we've got to be super precise about how much time passes. I mean, I know the Silmarillion gives us dates, right? But we don't have to share those, right? It's fine. If we want to expand that time, we want to give them an extra century. We can have the long peace be 500 years instead of 400 years. Who cares, right? Like who's gonna? We don't have to have a ticking calendar, right? Showing this stuff happening. What we're going to get are several periods of time here in season 4 and 5 when a lot of time passes. And in fact, the second half of season 4 is going to be a big one of that, right? Gondolin is being built and then established as a kingdom. Time passes, right? So the fact that we're going to have vague time passing like that, I think gives us plenty of time to have the Edain get to Beleriand, right? So that when they show up at the beginning of season 5, it doesn't feel weird. Exactly, Marie. Until the mortals arrive, time is fluid. Once the mortals arrive, we're on a much stricter calendar. Because So that's all good.
Yeah.
That's all good. Yeah. The human beings are going to be inconvenient when it comes to that. That or make it easier one way or another. So, okay, good. Yeah. So, and this is, of course, another advantage of having the Hildorian stuff chronologically occurring in the first half of season 4, because it gives us the whole comparatively indefinite. We don't know how much time I mean, that is, we can play with the amount of time that passes between the Dagor Aglareb and the escape of Glaurung, right? That is good, because that indefinite period of time while Gondolin is a building and Glaurung is a growing, we can have the men go a wandering, right? So that's all fine. Great. So that was a third of what I wanted to talk about today, which is awesome. Since we're pretty much out of time. But no, we covered so much stuff here. Oh my goodness. Like we solved where hobbits come from. We didn't fully do the story.
Well, no, but I
we
think
pretty much solved where hobbits came from, right? Come on.
I do think this is the point in time to talk about that stuff. So it was unexpected,
but is so as soon as Dave leaves, we're like, hey, let's answer all the mysteries about the whole rest of the history.
Dave's going to be so bummed.
Exactly. Let's hope Dave's on board with our plans here.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll have to save dragons. And the last thing we wanted to talk about was Luthien. I'm about to say the dangerous thing, which is that I don't think it's going to take us that long to talk about Luthien. But We'll see.
Ladies and gentlemen, place your bets. Place your bets.
Okay. Let me end with my big question about Glaurung. Here's the problem. Here's the problem of Glaurung as I see it. I think it's no problem at all. It's a perfect time for Glaurung because when Morgoth comes back from Hildorian and everything's, the Dagor Aglareb has happened and almost all of his orcs are destroyed, he's back to the drawing board as far as his offensive against the elves are concerned. He'll be happy with what Sauron has done, and he's like, yeah, step up the suspicion and confusion. Let's do that thing. So that his response to that would be like, okay, drawing board, let's go, we need something else in addition to the orcs. So he comes up with dragons. That all makes perfect sense. Here's my problem. My problem is, why does Glaurung do what he does? Why does Glaurung escape? It seems dumb. Glaurung is really smart, right? Glaurung is a genius and wily and deceptive and a really good long-term strategist, right? So how can we make Glaurung go on his little teenage rampage, right? Which seems clearly to be a stupid idea. Without it being a stupid, like, whose stupid idea is that? How does that come about without somebody having a stupid idea? Either Glaurung or Morgoth or somebody. I mean, it either has to be a premature, release of the strategy, right? Like, okay, the dragon's done, let's go. And Glaurung goes out and gets his butt kicked and they're like, okay, dragon's not quite done yet after all, right? So either it has to be a failure on that level, or Glaurung's doing it on his own, right? And he's like, I think I'm ready, let's go. And Morgoth is like, no, you idiot, you're not ready yet. And then Glaurung's like, I don't care, I'm going. And he goes out and gets his butt kicked, in which case he looks stupid. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to solve that problem. That's my biggest question with Glaurung, is how do we make the attack of Glaurung happen without making the bad guys, including Glaurung, look foolish? So that is the problem I would love to hear your ideas about for next time, because I haven't yet figured that out. I don't see my way out of that problem. There probably is one. I'm sure there is one, but I don't see it yet. So I very much crave your advice on that score. We need to be thinking, of course, about dragons and how they work exactly. Do we have him working with raw materials like they did with the orcs, right? Starting with an elf template and warping those into orcs. Do we start with an eagle template and warp it into dragons? How do we do that exactly? Or does he breed it from an animal and then invest it with a spirit? So is it like are dragons corrupted eagles, or are they beefed up werewolves, like were-lizards or whatever? Is that, we do kind of need to solve the origin question that way, one way or another. Yeah. So I don't know. Those are the two biggest issues that I see with Glaurung that we've got to sort out. And then we'll talk about Luthien. The question with Luthien is, what can we let her do? We want to involve her. We want to show that she's a big deal. We don't want her just to be eye candy. We don't want her just to kind of totally come out of nowhere. The fact that she's a big deal, we feel the need to establish that in advance, And I think that makes a whole lot of sense. But we can't spoil her, right? We can't have her doing the thing. What she does after she connects with Beren has to be significant, right? It can't just be like yet another adventure in the mighty conquests of Luthien. So we've got to kind of walk that line there. How do we make that work? So those are the main issues that we need to resolve. If we get through those, we can start the next task after that's the end of our big issue discussion, big plot discussions here. At the beginning of this season, the next task will be to take all these things we've been talking about, to take our Gantt chart and make it into an outline. How are we going to cover all this stuff in what sequence through our 13 episode season? maybe we can start thinking about that. When we've been already a little bit, right? We've got some of it tucked in here during our rambling discussion today. So we got some things. I feel a lot clearer, in fact, in my mind about the shape of the season, thinking about the first half and the second half and how they work together. Today's discussion really clarified that a lot in my mind, at least as far as the bad guys are concerned, which contains a lot of the good guy stuff. So anyway, we'll start thinking about that if we get through Dragons and Luthien in time next time. We might not, though. We might spend all of next time talking about the Dragons and Luthien, in which case, fine. That's all good. We are not in a huge hurry. So very good. With that, I think we're going to sign off for today.
I got about maybe 30 more years of lucidity left in my life. So,
That's fine. Still gives us time. We're good.
Okay.
We're good.
We might not make it to the third age by that time, but okay.
I figure, we'll probably get to the War of Wrath by season 12 at the latest, I bet. We'll make some stuff up in season 2, but I don't think we're going to go that far, I don't think we'll... 25, I think, is perfectly fair. I bet we can get through the third age in 25 seasons.
You think so? All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Place your bets, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
And with that.
So that's fine. Which means that by that trajectory, Exploring the Lord of the Rings will finish before Film, in fact.
That's what Tony just said. We have 20 more years of Exploring the Lord of the Rings.
Well, exactly. No, according to so we have Evil Dr. Cannon, who's a scientist, actually a
projected
PhD and professor. No, he's done a statistical analysis of our progress in Exploring the Lord of the Rings. And he's calculated that based on our current pace, the pace that we've been on now for the last year and a half or so, if we maintain the current pace, then we will finish we'll get to Well, I'm Back by sometime late in the year 2031.
And then you got to go back to the prologue.
And then we got to go back to the prologue and stuff.
Like
so it'll be a little bit after that. But I mean, so if you think we're already in 2019 now, so, it's, if we only have 21 more seasons, that only gets us to all the way to 2040 in film. So we'll probably finish Exploring the Lord of the Rings before I finish film. So
you'll be grandpa. You'll be going to your granddaughter's wedding.
Something like that. Yeah. No, it was funny. I was reading the post where Evil Dr. Cannon was posting his statistics while I was riding passenger in the car that my son was driving. And we were kind of joking about where he would be, he's going to be like, my son's going to be almost 30, when we finish Exploring the Lord of the Rings. So yeah. I'll be old, but I hope still lucid.
But like you said, and then he'll have the job of going back and parsing Exploring Lord of the Rings as your son, right?
Yeah. Then he can produce
make a whole career,
history of Exploring the Lord of the Rings, and
there you go.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. Or maybe like the natural, like maybe my grandchildren will then be able to come after and actually produce the Silmarillion film project.
Oh, there you go.
Because the Silmarillion will be in the public domain by the time my grandkids grow up. So there you go.
That's right. Oh, gosh, we can dream. All right. Well, anyway, it was a good session today.
Absolutely.
Even though Dave wasn't here.
Yeah. Despite Dave's absence. Very good. I know Dave's going to be sorry to have missed this one. Anyway, so we will be back 2 weeks. We're back on our regular schedule now, so we'll be back in 2 weeks. That is on the 8th of March will be our next session for Dragons and Luthien. So thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks for listening, and Godspeed. Okay.
So you have time for a bio break and then off to Parth Celebrant.
Off to Parth Celebrant, yeah. So I'm going to my Grifflet stream, and I'm going to be talking with, having a special session today, talking with one of the Lotro developers today. So
who actually did the quest change.
Yeah.
Which is going to be really interesting.
I actually wrote that quest change. That'll be fun. Thanks, everybody. And I'll
see you in 2 weeks.
You guys around. Absolutely. See you in 2 weeks. Bye now.
Bye.
Although the theoretical budget of our hypothetical blockbuster may be unlimited, the production budgets of this and the rest of our fun alternative educational projects are unfortunately not. If you have enjoyed joining our production team, please consider donating at signumuniversity.org/fund.